you for tuning in. I will tell you that this has really been fun for me. I feel like going to head towards a new career as a talk show host. And it's been really nice to be able to explore the volunteer and the philanthropic work of some really important members of the congregation.
Or I can,
Can we, we'll have to, can we mute everybody? Yeah. So it's been really great to be able to explore the work, the volunteer work, the philanthropic work of some wonderful members of this congregation. But more than that, there was a secondary purpose to doing this series, this Spitzen series, and that was, it was an opportunity for us to get to know each other. And I hope that we're able to continue to do that. I believe it was on the first night I said that one of my biggest regrets as the rabbi here was that earlier on in this community, both Florence Melton and Buddy Mayer were members, and they were members here well into their 90s. And these are two extraordinary pioneering women. And I always said I'd like to do an evening sitting on the bima with them and letting them tell their stories. And I never got around to it, and they're no longer with us. But yet their legacies are so powerful and they live on. So we're able to do this now live. And I'm really appreciative, Ron and Meryl, that you're giving us your time. And I know it's going to be a great hour. And you come after a series of 3 people who have been, I think almost all of them are neighbors of yours also. Yes. But the Lippies were here, and Betty Kane was here, and then Dana Adler was here, who's not a neighbor of yours, moved down here recently, but I know that you know of her because of the Berry program, which she did together with Alan. And Alan, their son, is on, as well as their grandson is somewhere. I don't see him right now, but we welcome the whole family. What we've witnessed, though, are people that have truly made a difference with their lives, with their time, with their resources in the American Jewish community and the relationship between the American Jewish community and Israel. Individuals and organizations in Israel, as well as individuals and organizations in the Jewish world who live in the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, etc. And some incredible stories that we've heard about the work that we've done. Ron and Meryl, I've been appreciative of the two of you from the time we first met. I had a wonderful relationship, as you know, with your mother and father, Meryl, who are very much missed and thought of. And I know shine down on you guys, because Jewish life and synagogue life and philanthropic life was at the core of what was important to them. And so to see what you guys have done with it must bring them incredible pride. And then from the time I first met you, I knew how important Yiddishkeit was, and Jewish life was, and Jewish communal life was, and Israel was to you. So that's certainly one reason, and we began to develop a friendship. But then the second reason also is that I had gone to Ron after conceiving of this idea of TLC, of the Tzedakah Limud and Chesed program, and I bounced it off of him. And I didn't really have to convince him or even ask him. But what he and Meryl did together when they spoke about it is they allowed HOT, hands-on tzedakah, to become the primary funding source for TLC, and I feel grateful for that every day. And I know there are so many beneficiaries of that in the work that Summer Fairman does, and then the work that the two of them are able to do together, the 3 of them are able to do together, is really wonderful. And that's stuff within the Jewish community, but it's way beyond the Jewish community. We had some fun getting food to Haiti, if you remember, going down to the port. And there have been a few other such. Your hurricane work has just been incredible also. So what I'd like to do, before we speak about what your projects and what you've done and what is so important to you, obviously, by virtue of your projects, is I'll just quickly do a little bit of your resume. I think people know the two of you pretty well, but Ron and Meryl have been involved in the Jewish community and federations for over 40 years. Meryl currently is serving on the Jewish Federation's Executive Committee and its Program Funding Council. She oversees the allocation process. She represents the Federation as a trustee on the Jewish Federations of North American Board. She has served as the chair of Women's Philanthropy 2009 through 2011. She's led numerous philanthropic efforts and events for Federation and Jewish causes. And she and Ron have traveled to Israel more than 36 times, including multiple missions which they have led. She's a Prime Minister Council Lion of Judah. She's endowed her gift in both South Palm Beach County and at the New York UJA Federation. They're members of the Federation's Ketubah Society. Nationally, Meryl has served JFNA National Women's Philanthropy as Major Gifts Chair, as Planned Giving and Endowment Chair, and as an Executive Board Member. She's also chaired national initiatives, including an NVVP Endowment Leadership Institute. She's received multiple awards. I'm not going to go through that list, but if you call me, I'll send it to you. They've established together, Meryl and Ron, Hands on Tzedakah, HOT, a Boca Raton-based charity that reaches out to people in programs who fall below the radar and not traditionally funded. They've also established TLC, as I mentioned, here at B'nai Torah. The Gallatins are extremely proud of their children who share their passion. Amy Gallatin Casson and Alan have served as members of National Young Leadership, as well as recipients of and Alan's been a recipient of a Young Leadership Award. Ron has been a leader in our federation for more than 20 years. He has served as its treasurer, agency spin-off vice chair, overall major gifts chair, and St. Andrew's campaign chair. He's on its executive committee, facilities core board, and an advisor in many capabilities. He's served, and I think one of his most favorite projects locally has been the work that he's done with the Ruth and Norman Rails JFS board. The last 12 years as vice chair of strategic planning. He's also been vice president of strategic planning and executive board member of the Adolph and Rose Levis JCC. Until his retirement in '95, he was a managing director of Lehman Brothers, where he was the director of both new product development and corporate strategy. He was a member of the operating committee and widely recognized as the father of many of the early derivatives. In retirement, he's renowned for using his legendary Wall Street negotiating, analytical, and strategic talents to do the most good for as many people as possible. And I've gotten to learn about these negotiating talents that he has, because we've been in more than one negotiation, which I'm sure have been pretty mild compared to the stuff that took place in business. So he was involved in Federation in New York, has been very involved here, has done so much, received so many awards. We have both, I'm proud to say, are in the same club, having been Rotary Opal Award recipients. And Meryl and Ron have received the first Rails Humanitarian Award. I'm going to stop with this because I could go on for an hour with it. There's one more thing that I want to say. It has to do with a conversation that we had in our dining room or in our pergola one night over dinner. And that was when you spoke about your strategy for tzedakah and how you wanted to help people in need, but you didn't want to create dependence. And so you have an entire strategy of giving that makes people who are recipients of tzedakah understand that they have to do things to be able to get themselves on their own feet, to be able to do their own fundraising, etc. And so it's a type of tzedakah that's very, very important and very reflective of Rambam's notions of tzedakah. The other thing, and that is you give somebody a fishing pole and then they will be able to fish themselves. And you understood that very well. The other thing is that Rambam speaks about tzedakah, in concentric circles. And that is the first and most important people to take care of are yourselves and your own family, and then your own community. And it goes wider and wider. And then it ultimately has to do with the world. And your tzedakah work has reflected that too. And so, I cherish our friendship and I honor the two of you for the work. So with that as the introduction, I got a number of questions that I'd like to ask you. You're unmuted, correct? Yeah. So talk about what makes HOT unique and why you created HOT with so many different agencies in the Jewish world and in the philanthropic world. Why did we need another one? What do you do that's different with HOT?
I think the major difference is that we are.
Can you stay closer to your mic?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
The major difference is our attempt to pair the needs of organizations with what people find is most important. We start with the different areas we're involved in, and we tend to have approximately 45 projects every year. And within those 45 projects, there can be as many as 120 different ways to help those 45 projects. And what we've done is taken the thesis that everyone has something in their heart that an area is more important than another area. It can be poor, it can be hunger, it can be youth at risk, elderly, special needs, compassionate care, or victims of war, terror, and natural disasters. Yes, those last two have started to be more of what we've done than we ever intended it to be, simply because there's been a lot of it. Hamas raining missiles in Israel, we get involved in. Hurricanes, and obviously the coronavirus now is affecting every single one of our partner organizations. So the idea was to connect. The other idea, and I would say it was more prevalent when we began, but still relevant now, is the fact that every charity has expenses. So if someone gives $1, that dollar can become 75 cents or 65 cents or 50 cents before any is helped. It pays the salaries of whatever the charity is. It pays their fundraising. So we felt that if we could create a public charity, that the public charity would be able to do the following. It would be able to let the donors have 100 cents of the dollar helping people, or in some cases 200 cents when we do matching gives, and they pick exactly where it was. That we found the two things that donors appear to have the biggest problem with. Their first problem being that their dollar partially disappears. The second problem being that they don't know exactly what it's being used for. And what we did, and it's a very simple procedure, from our standpoint anyway, there are no expenses because Meryl and I pay them all. As far as the projects, we put in enough money every year to seed, to start the projects. It is for our donors to decide whether 8 more children are taken care of, 23 more people are fed, 19 additional Holocaust survivors have an activity. We run the total rampant of all the different things that presumably would hit someone's heart. They're all safety net, and it covers everything. And we look to the donors not to give us money, but to give us money and tell us where they want it to go.
Then it's handled expediently.
And the word expediently became the key word. If in fact we talk about Israel, if there is a problem in Sderot, which is right on the border with Gaza, or it's Ashkelon, that is more than a stone's throw, but you could hit a golf ball too. Assuming you hit the golf ball long enough. We get initially an email that could come at 2 or 3 in the morning, or it comes late in the day. And we examine what the issues are, what is needed, and money is transferred that day. In many ways, and we've been asked the question, well, how does it differ from Federation? And the answer is, we are partners with Federation.
Many times over.
Many, many times over. There have been times, literally at 2 in the morning, where I will make a decision to transfer money to be buying necessities when you're having missiles shot at you. And I will sometimes, it could be $23,000, and I can type a text to Matt Levin, who is who runs Federation, the CEO, and I'll say, you want to do half? And now I expect the answer the next morning. I get it generally within 30 seconds. He obviously doesn't sleep. And we've done partnerships. But the real key, Rabbi, is that we're trying to give people an opportunity to make a total difference, to pick the thing that matters most to them, to pick the thing, if it is special needs or it is whatever of our categories, they pick the category. They then look at 7 or 8 different organizations that we work with in projects. They pick the organization and then they see what is needed.
So I have a question. Let me interrupt you for a second. How do either the organizations that are in need or the individuals that are in need, how do they find you? Do you have people on the ground? Is there a network that identifies donor organizations? How do people find HOT? Like, for example, the people in Stay Road, how did they know to go to HOT?
Okay. There was an organization that existed years ago, run by someone I know, you know, Rabbi Regent Danny Siegel, that had a similar mandate, but it was done much differently. He would go and get $10 from all his friends to then take to Israel to find what he referred to as mitzvah heroes, and that what was he limited to. Initially, we took a bunch of his organizations and built on top of it. We have someone in Israel that is a consultant that we pay, who constantly monitoring every grant that we give. And he will, upon occasion, now the relationship goes back 17 years now. He will come up with organizations that we will do diligence. Sometimes we agree, sometimes not. And what's happened over the last few years, as Meryl left, is, trust me, they find us.
It's eyes and ears and resourcing out. And it's amazing how by word of mouth in the not-for-profit community, how you're sought out of the clear blue. The internet certainly has made resourcing out a slam dunk. So we're sought out by many, and in many cases, until we speak with an individual or they are on our website and see how we function to see if there's a fit. Sometimes the ability to go a more traditional fundraising route is not a match for us because we take a different approach. And again, with the word expedient, we don't have to wait for a show of hands to see the worth, the value, the amount before making a decision. It's done carefully and wisely, but again, to repeat, expediently. We don't have the time to waste. And the recipients, they themselves, young, old, middle, whatever it may be, it's urgent. It's urgent. It's not fluff. It's not a question, and I'm not saying that these things are not important. It's not cultural enhancement just to make the day go by. It's food on the table and the ability to function, to get a new job, to have counseling. Again, as Ron said, those safety net services that are sometimes a little off the beaten path.
So your answer there, Meryl, leads me to this other recollection, and that is, I think there have been a number of cases where you've been able to get aid to people quicker than other organizations have. And it's just like the two of you running this thing, like to families of the victims of terror or the fiancés whose husbands died in Gaza, that sort of thing. So how are you able to do it so quickly? Is that all about the guy you have on the ground in Israel?
Well, first of all, we have Israel and the States. The guy on the ground in Israel oversees the relationships that we have at this point in time. We have many of them that go back 7 years, 10 years, 15 years. Have become, we go to Israel a minimum of once, sometimes twice a year. We do not start with someone and make a grant, with a few small exceptions, unless we've actually met them and, to use the term, kick the tires.
Mhm.
We will occasionally, based on, make a small grant and see how it works. But that's often after using FaceTime, Zoom, or something where you at least see the person you're dealing with.
And they
As for-
understand that.
As for the expedited treatment, Meryl said it. We have no committees, unless you want to call us a committee. And the relationships are personal at this point in time. They've gone past. There are people who, when they're here, they can be guests in our house for dinner. We're there. It's very hard to be guests with 30 organizations all in the same week or two, but we break bread. And the feeling of each of them, each of the different organizations, to us are not organizations. There are people who are helping people, and that's how we see it.
So
And
are
well-
there, are there people who stand out in the years that you've been doing this for their particular inspiration, their particular something about their souls, their spirits, or their efforts that really stand out? Can you tell us about one or two
Sure.
of them? And,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, Beit El-Izrahi, Rabbi Yehuda Cohn and his wife, Ricky, who oversee, manage, direct, as they call it, their family, a children's home in Netanya. Here's an individual with a heart and soul, and he has lost some weight. When we first met him, he was a big, tall, burly guy whose main goal was to make sure that every child in this home sent to them by the courts felt that they had family. They were to be a part of the, I'll call it, geographic community, with pride, with confidence, with absolute no differentiation, as they, the 250 some odd residents, should not be separated out, let's say, in their school environment. So here's somebody who has taken his family values and transposed it into the way he has run and has managed this facility.
let me clarify one thing, which is he has 250 kids, and they came from the court system, but they didn't come because they did anything wrong. They came because either both their parents were in jail, the boyfriend, the single mom's mother raped the 13-year-old girl who now goes there.
Substance abuse issues, family issues, but they are, as he will tell you, they are my children. And to function day after day with a philosophy like that, and putting oneself out there as the parent who has seen a child become a bar bat mitzvah, has walked someone to the chuppah, who has been there for a brit milah, goes far beyond that setting. So yes, absolutely outstanding, as he has imbued that in his staff. So if you talk to a staff person, you get that same feeling also. That's incredible, absolutely incredible.
Actually, it becomes a fascinating case study because well, as you know, Rabbi, each year, twice, right before Pesach, right before the holidays, we print something called the Hot News. It has grown. This year it shrunk. It shrunk from 60 pages to 56 pages. Okay, that's a major shrinking. And what we do is we describe every one of the projects. Ground rules, very important ground rules. We never give a penny or a shekel to any organization who we believe can get the money from somewhere else. We get grant requests Wonderful, that's what you need. What have you done to get it from somewhere else? I'm going to read something very quickly because it tells you pretty much everything. If someone decided that youth at risk was their choice, and that Bedell's Rocky that Meryl just explained is their choice, $2,822 for additional tutoring per child, $4,412 for kids living in the home for normal environment to have a birthday party, $48.54 for replacement of doors to 12 girls' bedrooms at $382 each, 12,000, I'm now doing rounding, 20 computers, 600 each, 13,000 new tables and chairs. It goes on and on and on. And it's a list of very specific things. Is it more important that a girl has a door to a bathroom that's broken down? Or is it more important to feed somebody? Is it more important to take care of a Holocaust survivor or to children who are caregivers to their own parents and grandparents? Not a decision we want to make.
But in the same light of, I'll call it values, and maybe this is what has resonated with me, with us, in terms of those, I'll call them directors, for the want of a better use, who oversee the various programs. When we look at our ethical values as Jews and the whole concept of tikkun olam, and then you sit at the table or via FaceTime with an individual and you see the same thing happening as we have dealt with the Border Patrol in Jerusalem. The word family is an overriding principle with how here these stoic, okay, and they're part of the IDF, the armed forces, look at how they treat and meet the needs of the individuals who are protecting the borders. The deep concern that these commanding officers have expressed in terms of what their family, and they use the word family over and over again, to make sure that they are stable, they are fed, they are safe, the spouses, the parents. A few years ago, we had a meeting and we found out that there were young couples with the children and the parents sleeping on the floor. And I sat up straight in my chair. I said, what? No beds? You've got to be kidding. A baby sleeping on the floor? Well, fast forward. Because of that template and how we responded to meeting those needs for beds and mattresses is how we got to Susie Broad's Sweet Dream Makers here in Boca Raton, in Palm Beach County, with kids in needs and not having beds and can't function if you don't sleep at night. How do you make yourself viable as a student in school? No bed, no breakfast, no functioning. So it is rippled across the board in terms of how people influence others, how we've been influenced, how we have been impressed, and it boils down to values.
Who's the chairman of your board?
Well, that's an easy one.
Yeah.
Meryl is chairman of the House. I'm chairman of the pot. The pot is in the House. So it's a fascinating question.
Have you had over the years, when did HOT start?
2003.
So over the 17 years, have there been, you don't have to go into the specifics, have there been any recipient agencies or people that you've disagreed about?
We had a bunch of agencies. First of all, not every agency that comes to us or is recommended to us do we do business with.
Right.
And we have, as time has gone on, reevaluated need. If something grows to be big enough and now is doing worldwide fundraising of their own, they don't need us. Yes.
But if we got them started, that was fine. If we pointed them in a direction where they could get more traditional funding, that was fine too. So it is taken that path often.
I want to ask a more, perhaps a theoretical question, I think, and it's a values-laden question also. And that is, for many in the Jewish world, our concern about tzedakah was a concern about helping our own. And so Jewish organizations, Jewish agencies, and so many communities for so long, we took care of our own. And that's based on this notion, if we don't take care of ourselves, who will? And it's also this whole idea that Rambam gave about taking care of your own family and those closest to you, etc. So we do take care of our own. But clearly we're at a point in Jewish history that's a reflection both of the affluence in Israel, where Israel now has, many billionaires, and there's the beginning of a whole tzedakah culture in Israel for the first time. It's just the beginning, but it's starting, as well as being in a community such as our community, where we do a very good job taking care of our own. It's an affluent community. So at what point and to what benefit, and it might be an obvious question, do we think beyond ourselves and realize it's not only a call to help others who are in need, but that's beneficial to us also? So, yeah, go on. You can take it.
Actually, this is a question that we face every day. And in many ways, though, it's not dissimilar to the other question of, is it more important to take care of a survivor or a young child or someone who's hungry or someone who has special needs?
Right.
These are the two sets of decisions. Actually, the third set, the people who are interested in, of donors who are interested in Jewish people and have the view that's where it should go, can pick between our Israel projects and a bunch of domestic projects which are Jewish. We have a bunch of non-sectarian projects. We believe that people who need help don't have color. People who need help need it for a reason that may parallel another group. And I go back to the basic premise. There are people who drill down through the book I just showed you and will pick up and say, I'm interested and I want my money to go and do this or do that. I have a $5,000 check that came yesterday from a new donor, a Jewish new donor, who specifically said, I want this $5,000 to use for emergency needs at Caridad. Okay, Jewish donor.
Would you tell everybody what Caridad is? Most people know, not everybody does.
Okay, so Caridad is a clinic, medical services being provided, located between Boynton Beach, close to Delray Beach, serving Hispanic, Latino community, and a very underserved population. And many of the doctors who are on board at Boca Regional and Bethesda volunteer their time there for health services and counseling. There is an offshoot where they do have a soup kitchen at a building on the property. But in terms of the medical care, and getting back to your question, Rabbi, or your comment about taking care of our own, if we can find a way to uplift the communities that we are living in, and we can raise the standard, raise the bar for some of the students, such as at Milagro, where these young children, primarily Haitian, okay, stand a better chance. They'll be better members of society. And again, that we're not talking about meeting a need for race, creed, color. So there is a segment that we reach out to and to help that need our help. That's part of our ethical fiber.
The irony of it is, and as Meryl said, some things have grown because of other things we were doing. The Milagro Center specifically takes care of children who either have Haitian or Spanish parents who in many, many cases do not speak English.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a baby, you learn to talk by mimicking your parents. Well, if you're born in the United States and until you're 3 or 4 years old, the only language you hear is Creole, starting school, even preschool, kindergarten, is virtually a recipe for failure if you only speak Creole or Spanish. Now, if you hold that thought for a second, we have financed in Israel a whole bunch of what are called moadinites. What they principally are is a bunch of Russian kids or Ethiopian kids whose parents didn't assimilate fully and speak only the old language. And poverty is heavily attached to it. And so we did a bunch of these where the schooling time for it is these kids would be from 2 o'clock till 7 o'clock after school. Okay. School ends early for young kids. And they had a house mother and they worked on Hebrew language skill. And this was a wonderful thing.
Well, they'd be on the street.
Then what happened is, the story isn't worth telling of how I stumbled on Milagro, but wake up, identical service. In one case, it's the Jewish kids in Israel. In the other case, it's the basically Roman Catholic kids here. And as Meryl said, we don't look at the color.
Right.
Remember, to go back to the beginning of HOT, we take an amount, Meryl and I give a certain amount of dollars every year beyond expenses. And that's, as I said, that ends up seeding projects. Some are seeded higher than others, but enough is done that all that is now necessary is if somebody thinks Milagro is important, or someone thinks another project we have that's local, Caregiving Youth, which is a bunch of kids who, when they come home at 3 o'clock from school in Boca, okay, immediately their mother or father is walking out the door because the mother or father was taking care of the grandfather who was sick. Whoever group it is, ground rules are the same, and it's one which someone asked the question of, how do you get organizations to accept a grant and have no expenses to it? And it's a very simple answer. That's the rules.
Yeah.
There is not enough money in the world to help everybody who needs.
Right.
So if one organization won't do it by our terms, another will.
Right. So I assume that, like anything that one does which is public, there's always politics involved with it.
I'm sorry?
So, like anything one does that's public, there's always some politics involved with it. Now, you minimize the politics, or at least you make it into a marital issues when you deal with HOT, and I'm joking. But when you go outside, then, if you give to a particular organization or choose not to give to a particular organization, there can be political overtones to that. I know
we haven't had that, Rabbi. If we don't give, okay, the individuals are told why you don't meet the profile, or there is another source. They're not left high and dry, and some people seek us out and choose to meet with us, and we have found that they didn't do their homework about us, since there is a website. And but we have not had any I'll call it issues, political issues, as you might think, in doing that. As a matter of fact, there were a couple of emails way back when I had routed individuals to a different source, thanking me for making the connection, letting me know how that worked out.
But to get to political, HOT has had more than 100 organizations that we've dealt with over the 17 years. HOT has had more than 500, might even be pushing 1,000 organizations that we have not dealt with because there were requests made that just didn't fit what we do. To the best of my knowledge,
I can't think
there's
of
been
any.
no political ramifications of any kind, none. And the reason is the good one, because of the fact that our donors are the ones that are funding. Our
Right.
donors are the ones adding. We have let go some, which seemed important to us, but after a few years, we saw no one was expanding. And it didn't mean to the donors. They're gone, new one comes in. From our standpoint, we don't care. That's the inverse of it. It doesn't matter to us that the kids in one place are being fed versus another. The question is, how much expensive it would be to feed them or feed them? And what we end up
How can
doing,
we do both?
and we end up using our money to be for the most amount of people as possible. So,
How many hours a week do you work on this? By the way, everyone should know that Ron is also the president of the board of St. Andrew's Country Club, which is probably a lot more painful
How many?
volunteer work than this is. Yeah.
Meryl can't possibly know.
Some of
because
them are in the middle of the night
when she's sleeping.
when I'm sleeping, and I do see the emails, and
Let me answer the
it
question.
varies.
Yeah.
It's somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 hours. That would average 50 to 60 hours a week. There
Wow.
are weeks where it's been well over 100.
Wow.
And if someone says, well, how do you do that if there's only 168 and you got to sleep? Sleep, fortunately, has not been something I need a lot of. Although I will confess, it was much easier to work these hours 20 years ago than it is now.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Would you do the group a favor? Most people on this call are familiar with Summer Fairman.
Right.
Would you tell?
Wonder Woman?
Could you tell? It's being that it's her birthday week.
Yes.
Could you share a little bit about Summer Fairman?
Okay, so
You
I
know,
play.
like I'll put in a plug for her here and there, but I don't think people understand the depth of her commitment to help. And so since your agency is so very
I'm
important,
going to do Wonder Woman.
speak about Summer.
Okay.
Sorry, Summer.
Yes, she loves this.
We're going to strictly coordinate this into the word HOT because the relationship we have with her actually started with the TLC program, which is not financed by HOT, we finance it separately. That's got nothing to do with HOT.
Oh, okay. I'm
Having
sorry.
said
Bill.
that, there, Summer has multiple email addresses, and one of them is summer@hands-on-seductive. Okay. Whenever there is a local problem, like a hurricane, Summer is carefully removed from her other duties in TLC due to the kind acceptance of the rabbi, and she works. I can't give you the amount of hours
Yes,
in a
for
day
her hours.
because they
Yeah.
exceed mine.
Yeah.
There was only one time that I texted her at 2:45 in the morning and she didn't respond to the text. And she did, but 20 minutes later she did. And I wrote, where were you? She said, I took a nap. That is, to her, that's sleep. Summer has coordinated all of our US emergency needs. The US, by the way, includes the Bahamas, Puerto Rico. She has a black book. Guys, this is not a dating book. She has a black book that truly is probably saleable. She knows everyone who is in the business. What's the business? Helping people. If we're going to do something, well, actually, this is the best example. During Hurricane Harvey, we got involved about an hour after it hit Houston, while the storm was going on. She called someone in Houston to know exactly what was needed. We then found out it was easy to buy in Boca, but we couldn't get it from Boca to Houston because Louisiana was flooded. So we end up calling a Costco in Dallas. Summer makes a call to someone else, and we now have a truck and a driver.
And it's done.
Okay. But the problem was that Costco was out of everything on our list. So she asks the Costco people, where do you get the stuff? And what do they mean? She wanted to know where the warehouse was that supplies Costco. To make a long story very, very short, a few hours later, her truck, her friend's truck, is now pulled up to the ramp of the Costco warehouse that supplies the Costco that was out of everything. Mysteriously, the order that was placed by the Costco in Dallas with the warehouse was pirated into the, the truck. And miraculously, the truck on its way after that stopped off at some other place to get all sorts of plumbing equipment. And 3 hours later, it gets to Dallas, Houston. 2 hours later, we're back to napping again. The driver of the truck slept for 2 hours in his cab, waiting to get to a church and the JCC. It went to the church first, and she arranged to make sure that the stuff that was needed first was closer to the door. I mean, it just...
There's not a day that goes by, and Rabbi, so much is attributed to you for going beyond the Bima and caring so deeply about the community, or a large community. So Summer has been able to flourish, and through TLC and following a template from HOT and her unbelievable resources in that Black Book, okay, to make sure that as many get served. And not only that, she is creating relationships with congregants and their families, young to old, within our B'nai Torah family, to meet these needs beyond the walls on 18th Street. And it just is something so simple and so caring, as I call it, the little TLC pantry that has popped up during COVID on 2nd Avenue near the Salvation Army. Something so simple, so caring, an outreach piece to show even someone who doesn't have a lot of extra stuff in their cupboard, in their own pantry, to make something available for someone else in need. From her sandwich making to her food cooking to her, I don't know where she gets the energy from. Amazing. And again, not only has that been her fiber, but it has permeated her family into our synagogue family.
So I just want to make one clarification or correction, and that is when you take Summer to do work for HOP, like when for the Haiti project or for the work that we did that she did in Houston, you're not really taking her from us. You're bringing all of us with her, and that it becomes part of us, and that is, that's why Summer is here, and that the whole notion of what does it mean to be a religious institution? What does it mean to be a synagogue, a house where Jews gather? It's a central part of it. And so, we could speak about Summer for a long time, but I just want everyone who's on this call to understand, what Summer means to the Tzedakah community here. And particularly, it's not the big agencies that Summer's most concerned about. It's the individual people who are suffering. And she has this huge heart that breaks with their hearts, but also sees ways to motivate people to help others. And so she has what, what she has done in terms of motivating people to be involved in tzedakah is just extraordinary. Last year, I believe we had about 800 to 900 people involved with our TLC projects, and it's really in good measure, thanks to Summer and thanks to the partnership that she has with you guys also. So Betty Kane has a question in the chat room, and the question is this: she'd be interested to know, after talking about you guys, she says, I'd be interested to know if you get gifts from Israeli donors, and how about Israeli partners for specific hot programs?
We do have multiple Israeli donors. A couple of them are Sabra Israelis. Many more of them, including a rabbi actually, are Aliyah, Aliyah from the U.S.
Yeah.
And so they're filing U.S. tax returns in addition to their Israeli returns.
Yeah.
But we have found, when we first started this, there really weren't many Israelis who gave to anything. Israelis have had a major change over the last 17 years. And they now, in almost every project, whether it's HOT or it's any other project, are donors. And it's actually refreshing.
Yeah.
But,
So we'll wrap up. I want to thank you for your time this hour. I thank you from the deepest recesses of my heart on behalf of our community, for what you do for so many, and that not only what you do for so many, but what it represents in terms of what it means to live a religious life and a Jewish life. And it's really been beautiful, and you inspire many people. Josh, are you proud of your grandparents?
He's muted.
Yeah, I'm proud.
Yeah, you should be. Good. So thanks everybody for joining us, and look forward to
Thank you for the
our work in the future. God bless you guys.
Thank you.
thank
Oh,
you.
one more word for everybody who's on. If you have not yet brought food over to the synagogue, our collection this week is specifically a collection to honor Summer for her birthday this week. And we've done fairly well, but we can do better. So there are bins of food in our lobby that are going to agencies in need here in this community. So take care, be well, and Moadim L'Simcha, Chag Sameach. We'll see you all in Shul. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
This was on.
Bye.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Meryl.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody. It was
Hi, Rhoda. Nice to